I'm going to start the interesting, I hope to you, session with some successes and some failures because life is only fun when there's a failure, right? We love to see the successes, but we also love to see the failures too. So with any luck, this slide has just progressed to the next slide, and it tells you who I am, but we're not interested in that. What we really wanna get to is the meat of this talk, which is to talk about content, because I think that, I know that Google says content is king, and we go, we're very dismissive sometimes of what Google tells us, but the content on your site, I know that we live with our clients every day, not literally, but, figuratively, we spend a lot of time with our clients, and so really know their products, like, we know them inside and out. We could find our way through the most convoluted website to the exact answer we needed just because we know them that well. Well, unfortunately, not everybody knows them that well, and that's where content comes in. And I have worked with all sorts of clients from a government department in California all the way through to e-commerce. I've done, uh, massively huge B2B and M2B sites, and they all need content because content is how we understand the world. So, like, don't dismiss the whole content thing just because, you know, Google's constantly saying content is king, blah, blah, blah. Um, Too little content, though. I know, I'm always like, don't put too much content in, but if we cut back content too much, either people aren't going to find us or there's going to be a real problem with actually finding our way to what we need. And I had a client, not a client, a friend. I should hesitate to uh, add that she's just a friend. She's not a client. So I'm really, oh, I've stopped hearing myself. Um, I hope I'm still there. So I hesitate to add that she is a friend and she had to have her site fixed. So now that I can't hear myself anymore, I'm hopeful that you can hear me, and we'll go on to talk about too much content making a confusing journey, because too much content can make it really confusing for people to find because, they're looking and they're like, well, do I click here? Do I click there? I don't know. Where am I clicking? It's really, really difficult. So I really love Japan, and I really love the sort of the look and feel of things in Japan. They're so credited. Have you ever seen a Japanese website or Korean website? Because it's just like it's full of stuff. And it's, to Western eyes, really, really confusing, but that's exactly what they're looking for. So we've got too much content, really making it difficult for people to find their way through. So maybe we don't do that either. But then, where do we find the balance? Like I've just said, you've got to have content. And I've said too much content is no good, but I've also said like too little content's no good. So where is the middle balance? Well, that is what I'm hoping to help you with now. So, where is the balance? We've got to find out by getting to grips with our content. Now, one of the things that I do is a lot of spreadsheets. So, I apologize in advance if any of you don't like spreadsheets, because this is going to be a lot of spreadsheets. But first things first. And now I've done some talks before about creating persona maps and like just creating personas. Personas is all about like, who am I writing to? A friend of mine does a podcast. I know this is a complete tangent, but like 30 seconds. She does a podcast. She has a persona, and she always thinks, what would Janice want to hear about? Like, is this for Janice? Does Janice want to hear this? Would Janice be interested in this? And she has like not quite conversations in her head with Janice, but it's a way that she gets to grips with, is this the right topic for her podcast? And if so, like, awesome, rock with it. But like, if not, what is it that Janice would want? How are we going to make sure that we're delivering something that Janice really wants to hear? So you've got to identify your personas. If you don't know who you're talking to, all that's going to happen is you're going to be giving, like disappointment on disappointment to people that, you should have been targeting, but you're not. So we've got our personas. These are the questions we have to think about. Like, Janice, now I'm stuck on Janice. Janice does not buy B2B stuff. but listens to podcasts about wine. um, so let's see, like what does Jennifer, we'll go with a different J, and I'm Judith. Hi. What does Jennifer think about things? Like where does Jennifer sit? What are the questions that Jennifer is asking at each stage of the buying process? Like, is Jennifer buying a solution for an airport? Is Jennifer buying shoes? What is it that we're targeting? And then we've got to think about the questions that Jennifer is asking. In an airport, is there an issue with Wi-Fi? How are we wiring these things? Do I have to dig up the marble floor because we've just done a huge amount of infrastructure for these new scanners, and the last thing we want to do is to put in these kiosks, tear up the floor again. So, what are the questions that Janice is going to have? Then, therefore, you've got to be answering those questions and map Janice's journey through the website. Like, if Janice is looking for a passenger solution provider or whatever, what are the questions that you need to make sure that Janice gets answered because Janice has a boss? Even if it's the CEO, the boss is the customer, and the customer is, the airport or whatever. Think about that, or the person buying shoes, or the person going to the restaurant. You've got to map somebody's journey through this process. If somebody's going to a restaurant and you're selling a point of sale solution, are you answering all their questions? So you need to be thinking about this before you create the content. I know we all love to create content. I love to create content. I can bill for it, which means I love creating content. And I love it when a client is unstructured, so they pay me even more money, right? I mean, no, I don't. No, that's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my freelancers' time because I have to organize it. I have to organize my freelancers. And then my client's like, well, it's great content, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. I don't know. So focus minds here. And this is an excellent way to focus minds and get the right content created, right? So we're thinking about focusing minds, making sure we're focusing minds. So we really want to be thinking about, what is it that we are going for here? Now, what have you already got? Now, again, I love charging people for stuff. We all agencies love charging people for stuff, but do I really want to waste my time doing stuff where they already have the content and all it needs is finessing, right? You agree with me, right? I mean, some of you are like, no, I will definitely charge the client. Or if you're in-house, no, I definitely want to have some busy work. My boss needs to see that I'm doing something. But, for the rest of us, we got to look at what we already got. And don't forget, there's an output from this. So if you've got a boss and your boss is really stressing you and you want to be thinking about, like, I've got to make sure that my boss thinks I'm doing something, there is an output to this audit. There's an output. There's a series of progressions that you can make. So, don't think that all you're doing is something that won't result in tangible work. Now, look at your pages. What have you got? Is everything that you've got actually in the index? Maybe, maybe not. One of my clients is a large site, about 6 million pages, and we actually have problems getting stuff into the index because it's just an issue with 6 million pages. And if you read Kevin, I haven't put this in there, I'm sorry. Kevin Indig has something called SEO Zempic. I think is the name of the article. It's one of his newsletters. And he has a really good article in there about a Google bug where if you try to get too much stuff indexed, then you get less rankings. So please be careful. But if you don't have 6 million pages, no problem. No worries. So yeah, sometimes some of us have problems no one else has. That was Google Search Console. Hopefully you knew, but if you didn't, that was Google Search Console. And this is SEMrush. And I love SEMrush because it gives me numbers, but SEMrush gives you some of the best screenshotable graphs. I mean, it does great work too, but you can screenshot these graphs and they are fantastic. So as you can see here, numbers. Everybody loves numbers, right? Because we're all data led and we're all really focusing on being data led. And we want to make sure that we're doing the right things, right? We want to make sure we're doing the right things. So data-led information. What have you got in the index? What's there? And so this is I won't tell you the client's name, but this is one of my clients, and this is their page coverage with backlinks. And hey, look at that lovely 43 ads keywords and 4,861 links to the homepage. And not all be organic, but we won't talk about buying links right now. So what have you got? What have you got? Screaming frog it. You know what I do? And I'll show you in a minute. I've got an example spreadsheet in here. One of the things I do, and I'm not talking about audits where I'm reclaiming stuff and I have to like screaming frog internetarchive.org once it's back up again. But the thing I do is screaming frog the existing site, but then here's the key. Go back in time by using SEMrush, Google Search Console, Majestic. I love Majestic. Use all the tools in your toolkit because Majestic has in its archive all your old pages too. And stuff that might be 404. So you're like, well, I don't see this. I don't see where it exists. But you can do audits of like pages that had backlinks before and all of a sudden don't have any backlinks. Why? Because someone deleted it without redirecting it. And it has like 10,000 backlinks from like, all the newspapers in the world. So we might want to reclaim that one from the 404 death pile. So what content have you got and what content have you lost? Is it in the index? What I just said. Is it in the index? Not everything has to be in the index, but we want to make sure that what we want in the index is in the index. Now, this is important. Have you actually thought about whether everything is broken up into topical groupings? Easy for a blog, much more difficult if you have a pre-existing B2B or M2B or whatever site where you've actually got content in different sections that somebody at some point, an engineer generally, because the logic for them is not the logic that necessarily marketing has, but somebody has put the content or critical information in a different section than what seems to marketing, I should hasten to add, logical, because my husband's an engineer, so I know, and my sister in the Canadian nuclear industry. What seems to an engineer to be logical isn't always what marketing thinks is logical. So make sure they're broken down. Not sure how to do it? Well, there is, luckily for us, an old, and by old, I mean like 4 years old now, gosh. There's an old article before life ended as I knew it, and I had to land and never fly again. No. I have been flying a lot, but here's from February 28th, 2020, when Andy probably didn't know what was about to come down. But using machine learning to group keywords, but we can also do it for our pages. So we can actually look at what our site has and use machine learning to group it all, which excites me because I'm lazy. And I like to make sure that other people do the work, but that it gets done right. I am also really pedantic and competitive, which, doesn't always mix well with being lazy, but it means that I'm always looking for efficiencies. So use this as an idea. And of course, like harass Andy Chadwick maybe to update the article or something like that. Now, we've got our content. Is it working? Because do you know the number of times I've gone in and it's like, wow, that piece of content got 3 clicks in the last 16 months. Excellent. No, it's not such an excellent job if your site's millions of pages and your content tends to get thousands of visits in a day, let alone in a year. So we want to know how it's working, but how do we figure that out? Well, I'm going to argue that we don't just want to look at Google Analytics. And if we do, we're going to have to break it up a bit. So this is Google Search Console again. Every page has queries. Every page has like a generic ranking, and then it has queries it's ranking for, which can mess up your generic ranking. So I've got a page here. It's not the example I used, but I've got a page here. It's position 19.8 on average, but the click-through rate is 8.9%. What the heck? Why? Because that's not the right-hand side here, but because for that particular page, which I couldn't show you because it was key, the top ranking keywords are fantastic, and the ones that aren't are actually irrelevant. Actually, I don't know if I should say this. Maybe I've got a really good story. We'll see if we have time. It is a really good story about a laboratory in pornography, but we'll leave that for later. Anyway, now that I've wetted your whistle for a tangential, not even a relevant conversation, how is your content working? SEMrush. So Google Search Console. Sometimes, clients or even our bosses don't have this set up. And I actually recently had that on a mature site. I said, "Have you set this up?" And they were like, "No." And so then we didn't have Google Search Console, but this is SEMrush. So SEMrush also gives you what SEMrush sees as your keywords now. Keeping in mind, SEMrush only looks at billions of keywords, whereas Google looks at a lot more. I think it's a billion or something like that SEMrush looks at overall globally if you look at all the language variants. You also can see your links. Now, I'm going to show you why I look at links in a minute. And you can see how it's actually working in your analytics. Now, Google Analytics 4 gets a bum rap, I think. It doesn't always get the love that it should. It is a really good system, and I really use it, and it gives you numbers. And if you're not looking at today or yesterday, if you're looking in the past, it's generally moderately good. Obviously, it has to be set up correctly on your site, but it's a good second look at what's happening, because otherwise we're only looking at organic traffic with Google Search Console, and SEMrush gives us organic with a little bit of ads, but it's not accurate. So Google Analytics, or what is it, Matomo, or there's like other analytics packages out there. So don't be shy. Make sure that you're actually, making sure that you're looking at your analytics and getting it done. So how is your content working? I did have to blur this out because it is a real client, so sorry about that. But what you can see here is my screaming frog crawl, and you can see it's red, yellow, green. But do you see over here where we've got links to the page on the right-hand side, traffic, and 3-month organic traffic? Why is it 3-month organic traffic? Because we want to look at a little bit more. However, this is a light content audit. This is not in depth, and this is really light, because what we're not doing here is we're not looking at all of the link data. We're not looking at 16 months worth of Google Search Console. We're not looking more in depth. With B2B sites, you're definitely going to want to look more in depth. And with B2C sites, you might only be able to get in 1 month before data starts getting skewed and you lose data. So sometimes you have to look at Google Search Console through the API, week by week, to pull out data that you then have to consolidate. And it's a much more complicated process. So let's not go into that one. But sometimes you have to break it down into smaller units of time and then consolidate in order to get this working. Now, once we know how things are working, and you did notice I have flagged stuff up as red here, which means I'm not happy. But I mean, traffic 0, because it's moved. But you can see here an indexable page only had four visits. That's sad. 4 visits makes Judith sad. So what we want to do is say, well, we found bad content, but what about the missing content? We should be looking at identifying opportunities where we can consolidate stuff. So here we can see the yellows and the reds, and we can see where the traffic's really low. But one of the reasons, and this is a client, and you know who you are, they might not be on here. I don't want them thinking, oh my God, she's totally slagging us off. This client had made so much content on the same thing that what was happening was all of the older content or some of the new content was dying. It was just dying because it was just terrible. That, they had 6 articles on one topic, and it was like your money or your life type stuff. So it's not stuff that you can just chuck out there and hope for the best. It was important stuff. It was about your health, and it was about maintaining your health. So yeah, no, don't do that. You can see here, I've got page level analysis of PA and DA and stuff like that. I don't think that that's the only thing that you should look at, but if a client asks for it, then we have to make the client happy. In this case, the client asked for it, so we had to make the client happy. But you can see I've pulled this from Screaming Frog to begin with, and then what I did look at was link the links to the domain from domain, sorry, not individual page level links. I also looked at how many visits, like page level views it was getting, how many organic clicks it was getting, and the number of keywords each of those pages was ranking for. Do not ask me how I did that once when I didn't have SEMrush, but let's just say we go to SEMrush and pull that data, shall we? Yes. Or, you can look at Google Search Console on a page by page level, look at the total number, because you won't be able to necessarily see all of it. So if it says like 1847 or whatever, we can put that number in. But SEMrush means that we don't have to look at it through the API and pull it through programming. We can just download it as a spreadsheet. So that's why I like it. Sorry. I know I know I'm sounding a little like a SEMrush advert, but Majestic is also a really important tool when we're looking at this stuff, because Majestic sees stuff that SEMrush does not. And also Screaming Frog, obviously I keep talking about them. They are inexpensive and really easy to use. So we do want to think about merging. And do I have it? No, I've got it on a different slide, but I do have an example where I told them what to merge. So the analytics here, you can see GA4. You can also see clicks, right? So clicks, impressions, and the page level click-through rate. We've also got the page level positioned, because for a quick and dirty analysis, if we're doing something really quickly on thousands, tens of thousands of pages, we can do that. Then you see I've got links according to Google Search Console, Ahrefs, SEMrush, and Majestic. Now look at the main page that you can see there, and look at the difference in the data that Majestic is giving you over every other tool, including, I should say, Google Search Console, but we all know why, because Google doesn't want us to have that information. So, we've got so much stuff happening in Majestic, so much more data. So definitely, this is why I love Majestic. So you can see here all the kind of informational pieces that I use on some clients. Other clients, it actually gets more sophisticated than this. Yes, more rows, more columns, I should say, on my spreadsheet. More rows for more pages, but more columns for more data. And they love it. Honestly, I know it seems like a lot, but it enables us to make really informed choices and look at all the data and say, well, that seems a little bit odd, so maybe not that. However, I keep saying, we should do these audits. Be careful when you're doing the audits, because this is my favorite disaster story. Do you see what I've underlined? I know it's a little small on my screen. I'm hoping it's a little bit bigger on your screen. Do you see where it says non-organic traffic was not considered? Do you see that? The page was not scheduled for deletion. They deleted a page on how to print, and this was a publishing site. Yes, I'll let that soak in for just a second, because you think about it, it's all about the content, and they deleted a key page that had thousands, tens of thousands of visits every month, but not from organic. I really want all of you to just take a moment to let that soak in. Just the disaster that happened and all the work that had to be done after that to put it back in the same place on a system that doesn't let you put stuff back in the same place. Yeah, that was very difficult and disastrous. And this is why I feel like I can never leave a project and work on another one within a client. I have to see it through to the end so that people don't do this. Please don't do this. Look at all the traffic, please, please. Pretty please with sugar on top. Look at all the traffic. Thank you. Now, oh yes, I knew I had one with merge. Now, do you see here on the right-hand side where I've got keep delete? And I actually, did I put in merge notes? Is the master in here anywhere? La, la, la. There you go, master. Do you see where it says merge on some of these and it says master? It looked down towards the bottom. So if you just look down towards the bottom, like 5 up from the bottom, it says master. So what I've done there is I've said, and you can't see the URLs, but what I've done is for each of the merges, and for redirects obviously as well, but for each of the merges, I choose a master page, and then all the other ones that are meant to be merged with that page in the notes is the URL of the master page. So where we have topics like STEM, so yeah, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, then yeah, you'd think I would know that with a mathematician for a younger brother and an engineer for a younger sister. And I'm in marketing. I am not the lovely favored child of the family. No, we're all equally loved, right, Mom? um, you can see here where I've put master, and then I've got like, sorry, not redirect, merge. And merge means where there's a URL, then I'm merging it with that URL. So, or I'll have notes in there saying I'd like to merge it with this, something that explains stuff to the client. So you can also do this. And it's really important that if you're deleting stuff, you have a record somewhere, because remember what we looked at a minute ago? Yes, exactly. And you want to make sure people sign off on it. Sometimes these things work and sometimes they don't. This is one client, and I've selectively chosen here, but I've chosen some successes and some failures and some perceived failures, which were actually successes. So the first one, you can see it looks like a failure. We've got less traffic coming through. Oh my God. But look over to the right-hand side. We didn't used to make money from the blog, and now we're making money from the blog. So that's awesome. We made more money there. And then I've got one where it's a little bit of a failure, but it's also lost money. Then I've got one where, again, it looks like it's a failure, but we're making a little bit more money. So it looks like a massive failure, but it's about flat on the money. So it's actually not that big of a failure. And then the last one where this article was a little bit older, but we refreshed, and all of these got refreshed, by the way. So stuff on all sorts of topics. All of these got refreshed that I'm showing you. I'm not showing you the ones we didn't refresh. There was one still going strong, did not refresh, is doing better this year, doesn't matter. But this one you can see on the bottom, we made no money off of that. We refreshed it, we changed it. We actually merged it with another one, and now we're making money. The one we merged it with, neither of them were making any money. And now one of them that we merged is making money. So it can work, it can also fail. Please don't think that this is a guaranteed success story. It can fail, but in this case, you can see where sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't work. And you can see that people, spending less or more time. So the last one where we merged it, they're spending more time and they're spending money. The first one where we improved it, it seemed like it went down, but they are spending more time and they're spending money. So it can be successful, but how do you handle this with clients, right? Because clients are always like, prove it. And bosses are like that too. So we always take a data-led approach, right? We always look at this from data, and once we've done it, we keep monitoring and we make sure we're watching stuff. And if stuff's not changing fast enough, you can go into Google Search Console and just like do the live test thing, and it kind of forces Google to look at it again and then ask for it to be indexed, just in case. We're always going to have dead pages. We should 301 them, or if there was something damaging about them, 310 them. Just kill them. Deleting content, it can be painful, right? We built it. In some cases, we wrote it. And now Judith is saying, well, just delete it. No, I'm not. I'm saying merge it, improve it. And on occasion, we might need to let it go sometimes. Because don't forget, the more relevant we are, the better. If it's irrelevant to our topic, could be damaging. Why are people visiting us for, I'm looking on my desk, blue water bottles, when what we sell is hand sanitizer? Yes, those are the things that are to hand on my desk in my office, water and hand sanitizer. But if we make a data-led argument and maybe not throw things at a screen, it can work with our clients. Just make sure, it's hard to let go of stuff we've built and paid for, but sometimes we just have to let it go. When it works, it does work. This was, oh shoot, we won't show that. This was a publisher that reconfigured their content, and what they did was to tidy up their content, and they were competing with another publisher, and they did a really good job of it, and it really was successful. They hived off part of their site. So they had certain types of content sprinkled through everywhere. And what they did is they pulled it out into a separate site, and it actually ended up doing really well against the main competitor, as you might have briefly seen there. And no, so I've just noticed somebody say, are we going to be getting the presentation? Yes, as soon as I reblock out that word. Obviously, if you know who the two sites are, you can look at it yourself. But after they did that consolidation, it did succeed really, really well. So they moved the certain content type out, made the stuff that was left even better, and it worked. It really did work. Now, what about other content? Because I said like repurpose stuff. What you can do, and I've picked on myself here, is you can actually go out and if you've done something like this, and I really should do this, I broke my blog and couldn't log on and only just got it fixed. So I will be taking past Instagram posts, sexing them up a bit and using them as blog posts. So if you've got a client, like I've got a client in B2C who does a lot of TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And they have lots of content on there, but it never goes anywhere except on there. We're going to pull it all together. We're not going to just duplicate it. We're going to pull it all together, make it make sense, and then use that in a blog post so that we also have this stuff on blogs so that, we have content that is targeted towards our, remember, personas. If it's not relevant to our persona, why are we putting it on Instagram anyway? Anyway, if it's not relevant to our personas, it's not going on the website. And if it's not relevant to our audience and it doesn't, target any of the content that we're trying to, any of the keywords that we're trying to, we're not going to do it, are we? Because we're going to do a SWOT analysis, I hope. I hope we've all done our SWOT analyses, and SWOT analyses mean that we are checking things to make sure that we are, if we're weak, we're filling it in. If it is an opportunity, we're grabbing it. If we are strong there, we're making ourselves stronger. And if there's a threat, we are making sure we cover it off. You can also use UGC with permission. So one of the clients I have uses bloggers to create content and stuff and then asks if they can use bits and pieces, not all of it. We're not just duplicating content, but we might be looking at reviews or we might be looking at bloggers and saying, hey, this is a really great way that you explained this. Do you mind if we utilize it? We'll give you credit. Or just look at how they've written the review or how they've written about your product and say, wow, is that how people are thinking about it? Oh my gosh, we should be doing that. So it's a really good way to think about your content and your site. And can social media be streamlined was one of the things. Yes, but I'm afraid it costs money. I love things that are free. And I used to use something called Social Oomph because it was free and it was easy and you just uploaded a spreadsheet and it tweeted everything for you. But now everything is going to cost. There's Hootsuite and things like that. I use Sendable. Sendable here, you can see we have a single post that goes off to different platforms. Also, what we did is in March, I want to say, is we created a bunch of tweets that took us to Christmas. So, or beyond Christmas, to the end of the year. So we actually pre-scheduled all of our tweets to the end of the year. And then for of the moment stuff, like they have an office dog. So of the moment stuff where they're filming the office dog, they will take film things of that month and they will post it in that month so it's relevant. So you can see here like what a typical calendar might look like of pre-scheduled posts, but I'm afraid this does come with a charge. Now, I did do an audit of various different services that were available for my client. This one was the most reasonable for the channels that they wanted, and so far they're very happy. And then you could do something like this. Now I've picked on Aleda. Sorry, Aleda. You can see that she's got that advent calendar for Star Wars only because I'm quite jealous. I haven't got any advent calendars yet. I got to go out and get myself a Lint one or something with chocolate or wine, or I think there's a port one out on the market now as well. But you can see you can actually get stuff across multiple platforms. This is not what she's doing, but this is how it can look because I didn't want to show a client because then I'd get in trouble. So sorry, Aleda, I picked on you, but you can see how it would then easily post across multiple different platforms. So it's something that you can think about. Sendable to make things efficient. And trust me, the money you save in time is less than what you're going to spend on Sendable. You will it's spendy. It's not 5p a month or whatever, but the efficiency is worth it. Efficiency is always worth it. Now, a couple of case studies. One client, the site was misbehaving. Everything was going down or up or down. I mean, look at those swings. And this was not because of something that we blocked. We didn't accidentally block pages in robots.txt or anything. We did a content audit. We grouped everything together. Now, don't forget, we had to look at the keywords we were targeting. We can't do any of this without one of my previous talks at I think it was either SEO Zone or it was one of the early digital zones where we have to look at keyword research. So we look at keywords. Do any of things overlap? Like I said, where I was looking at the merge, that was where things overlapped. Do we have links and do we have traffic? And then if we have to, we need to remap out the entire site if we have to. I am about to do that with a site, by the way, not a client. I sit on the board of directors of a charity. That's what we're doing. We're going to have to redo the whole site. I pulled all sorts of stuff. You recognize this from earlier. This is, like I said, an actual example. I did not make this up. These numbers are real. The result was stunning. It worked really, really well, and we were really happy with the results. It doesn't always happen like this, like I showed you, but for this particular client, it did work. Whew, thankfully, very well. I was very pleased. On a different client, as you can see here, the content was not being seen. Remember, red for me is no traffic or it's not in the index, but it's indexable. So we audited, we identified where the weak content was by metrics, and we improved it. We really worked hard on it, and it's taking a little bit of time, but right now it's moving in the right direction. But it was not like the other one. The other one was, waha! This one is, little by little, we move. And so what else? This is another one. This is my friend that I was talking about earlier, where I looked at one page, the only page that I was allowed to look at because it was actually hidden. And although those numbers are tiny, and so the percentages look impressive, this is her business. This is how she gets leads. So it's really important. So I have 5 more pages I'm going to work on for her, and I'm going to do them one by one and see if they still have this kind of success where they're seen more often. And her site has very low traffic because B2B. So I want you guys thinking strategically. What is going to bring you traffic? If it's the wrong keywords, it is useless. What content inspires action? There's a book called Contagious that is amazing. It is why stuff is interesting to people, and it will really help you. Make sure you've got the right hooks. What keywords am I focusing on? Don't think individual page, individual keyword. No. Think topical group, topical cluster, and that is what you want to focus on. And also, where can I improve click-through rate? And I just did that for a client where we rewrote the title tags meta descriptions. Google stopped changing them, and we got much better click-through rate. So we went from a 1.8 on average to, I think we're at 2.7 at the moment, and we're still trying to push it up. So obviously not a huge click-through rate to begin with across the whole site, but getting better. We want to make sure we know whether it's Janice, Jennifer, or Fred. Bob. My dog, Bob. I use Duolingo. And Duolingo, somebody's dog's name is Bub. Know your target audience, whether it's Bub, the dog, or if it's Janice. Personas. This is an example of a persona. This comes from an online tool. So it's not something that I made, but something that was made by a group of us for the client that I was working with on the day. Make sure you got to do your keyword research. And when you're thinking about your keyword research, look at questions, because people ask questions all the time. Like, everybody wants to know how many calories are in red wine, and a glass of red wine. And by the way, I don't know who's drinking a 100 milliliter glass of red wine, but no, they go bigger than that. 125 is champagne. Think about your year in advance. So make a calendar of blog posts or content. You know, if you're in-house, one of the most important things is that you think about the year ahead, or at least the month ahead, so that you can show your boss what you're doing, so that your boss doesn't think you're just sitting around doing nothing. And I have heard of people doing that. It's really weird. Measure the right things. Remember, don't bother with DA and PA unless your client absolutely demands it. And if your boss demands it, maybe a little bit of an education piece, because you don't want to be stuck doing that for the rest of your tenure at that business. Likes as well, not a valid KPI. Increasing sales, absolutely. And always be awesome. And that's the end of me. So hopefully, if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask them here or online later. I think there's like breaks and stuff where you can ask things. So please, if you want to find me online and ask me anything, I am around on Twitter and X or Threads, and you can ask me anything. So thank you very much for listening to my solo, it feels like, rant about what to do with content.
Judith, again, it was a great speech, great performance, great energy. And I just want to say in front of the audience that I think you are one of the most influential person in this industry. And it's very great to have you again here. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me. I always love the audience that I get at Digital Zone because they have always been the most amazing audience. They've always been welcoming and lovely, always ask super interesting questions, and are really smart. So I've always really enjoyed either in person or online speaking at Digital Zone because it's just amazing.
Thank you so much. And of course, we have some questions. I can maybe ask you one of or two of them. We have 2 minutes left, but I think we have some time. The first one is, how do you ensure that SEO consideration are mentioned when repurposing content?
I think if you're looking at SEO so if you're looking at content is often SEO led. If it's not SEO led, it means it's purely for the business and could go in a brochure and live on someone's desk. And then they'll be happy and they'll smile every time they see the brochure, and SEO doesn't need to worry about it. But SEO factors should always be taken into account 100% of the time. We need to think about what our audience is asking, what our audience needs to make the conversion. So whether we're driving leads, so for lead gen, or if we're driving sales, direct sales, every piece of content needs to have an SEO consideration. And that means that your persona, when they're initially researching, they'll have keywords they use. They'll have phrases they use when they first search. Then when they're refining their search, they use different keywords. And then when they're ready to buy, there's, even better intent driven keywords. So SEO has to be at every stage, whether it's technical to make sure that it's spiderable, well built. We have a title tag, meta description, H1 and content, or links, internal linking, all that sort of stuff. We want to make sure that we're absolutely nailing those SEO considerations. So what you saw on my spreadsheet, a lot of those are SEO tools, or all of them are SEO tools. But we want to make sure that we're saying to the boss or to the client, hey, if you want us to do this, we're going to bring you more traffic. We're going to bring you more clients. We're going to bring you more customers. But we have to think about how people behave and act online, which is why I mentioned social a bit, because SEO is super important. But clients, they're of the moment, so they like likes on their Facebook posts. And so they might say to us, well, if you're building a blog post, we want it to go on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and whatnot. So sometimes we have to think outside of the box for the client, but SEO is the primary consideration right now. Even with AI and AI answers, we have to be thinking about how Google and Bing and ChatGPT are working, how they're scraping the content, how people think and ask questions, and therefore how to structure things so it's the right structure with schema markup and things like that, so that our information is easy to consume by the machine and therefore easy to understand and easy to regurgitate by it.
I think it's a very well answer for the question, and more than he or she asked. And thank you so much. It's really a very good answer. I can get one more question. There are lots of questions and comments. And Mehmet Emre asked, "Is there any delicious chocolate for us?" I hope
Funnily
next
enough,
time
if
in
I had been
Istanbul.
there in person, I would have brought chocolate for questions.
Okay. But maybe we will get some in Istanbul and send to Mehmet for this question. So it would be fair, I guess.
I like that.
And I can get one last question. One of our attendee asked that, do you suggest using heat maps on the website is effective? So what do you think about it?
One of my clients uses heat maps, and it was a way that I actually argued for redesign of the website. So he was assuming that people would scroll, and I was able to use a heat map to demonstrate that no one was scrolling. So it's a really good way to see if people are engaging with your content, or if maybe your content's too big, it's too much, it's not the right content, etc. If people are not engaging with your content and they're not scrolling and they're not moving their mouse, nothing is happening. They're just sitting there for a short time and then leaving. Heat maps helps us see that. If no one's clicking buttons, if we've got calls to action and no one is clicking, heat maps helps us see that. So I think heat maps are really important, not for content audits and not for repurposing content, but what it does help is for us to say, right, the whole site needs to be rethought because you just messed that up and we need to rethink this whole thing. It's not your content, it's your website. It could be the content, it could be the content's poor, but heat maps, they will slow your site down. Do not have them live when it is a critical sales time. So if you've got a trade show, if it is Christmas, Black Friday, whatever, do not have your heat maps running unless you are super confident about your website speed. Otherwise, get that on there, make your argument using that data.
Yeah, I always hate the same dilemma to have it in the busy times, but it also decreases the page speed a lot. But I also totally agree with you. So thank you so much for the answer. And I guess people can ask the questions through social media on Twitter or in LinkedIn, I guess.
Absolutely, yes.
And I guess we will be able to share the presentation or not. So we can maybe get some comments on YouTube as well. So you can see the questions if there are any else. So again, thank you so much for being with us, Judith. It was a great pleasure and hope to see you next time.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for sticking with it. And I will see you soon, I hope.
Thank you so much. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.